Hello and welcome to Seattle City Makers. I'm your host, Jon Scholes. Welcome to episode 8 of our newly launched podcast presented by the Downtown Seattle Association, where I've had the great pleasure and privilege of featuring conversations with leaders from across the city of Seattle in arts and culture and music and development and real estate and business, and getting behind some of the headlines that they're making in our community and better understanding their leadership and decision-making and how they're shaping how we experience our city. Here in episode 8, I sit down with Tom Mara, who's the longtime executive director of KEXP Radio. He really built the station from what was a campus radio station over there at the University of Washington, known as KCMU at the time, into a global content and music platform that reaches millions of people online, on YouTube, and across the airwaves each and every week. I have a deep appreciation for KEXP. It's some place I turn to quite frequently to discover new music and artists, and music plays an important role in my life, even though I can't play a dang thing. The highlight of my own music career was making second chair in 5th grade with the trumpet, and that lasted about a week and a half before I was dethroned. But I'm an avid listener and love KEXP, all they do in the community, and all the artists that I've discovered across their airwaves, including one I'm seeing tomorrow night over there at the Tractor, which I discovered last year on KEXP. So Tom and I cover his career at KEXP and his early days there as a volunteer, talk about the big pivot they had to make in order to keep music on their airwaves during the pandemic, and how they also have adjusted a lot of their programming and DJs to better reflect the diversity within our region and bring greater artist diversity across their airwaves. Hope you enjoy my conversation with KEXP's Executive Director, Tom Mara. Well, thanks, Tom, for making time to be on our newly launched podcast.
Thanks for reaching out.
We don't quite have the global reach of KEXP yet with Seattle City Makers, but we're well on our way. You're going to help us get there. We're coming to you from the station, the headquarters, just off the gathering space, and in the studio where you master live recordings. Have that right?
That's right. Before COVID, we were doing between 300 and 400 sessions with artists, and those are live mixes because 95% of those are live over the air. But after the session, we take it into this room, and this is where we master it. This is where we go back in, refine it, and get it ready to be distributed primarily through our partnership with YouTube. And the interesting thing about KEXP, I think, and I still scratch my head. I started as a volunteer in 1987. I still scratch my head here. Our largest audience is not our radio audience.
Yeah.
Our radio audience reaches about 200,000 people a week. Our video audience reaches about 1.7 million people a week. And for somebody that started when all we had to worry about was this 12-mile radius from the top of Capitol Hill where our transmitter was. Life was simple then, really simple.
You could see everybody that was listening.
You could knock on their door.
Yeah.
But it is a glorious time to be alive in non-com media. There's just so many opportunities to generate more impact. The question is, where do you put those resources? What are the strategic bets you want to make? And how do you really steward the organizational culture that will really enable KEXP to do amazing work?
So you mentioned when you started here, and it's no secret you're retiring after 31 years.
Yeah, June 30, yeah.
In June, coming up here. Yeah. Do you remember that first day when you walked into KCMU as a volunteer on the campus?
I should admit, I remember the first time I tried to volunteer at KCMU. And I had just moved to Seattle. And my brother, who was my music shaman growing up, said, "Tom, you got to get involved in this station." So I called it. It was before cell phones, and whoever answered said, "We have a volunteer meeting coming up in a couple of weeks." And so I went to it, and it was intimidating because you walk in the room, maybe 3 times as large as this sort of bedroom-sized studio, and you got 80, 90 people in there that were effectively running KCMU. Chock full of characters. These are uber music fans in the Seattle area. And as this young kid, after growing up in Germany, not really being all that exposed to American culture, it was fantastic. And I actually
tryouts. You couldn't just go help out.
Well, Well, I'm not sure what the process was because a person became a mentor of mine later. Chris Knob was the station manager at the time, and he asked for volunteers to come and stuff envelopes. And I bounced over to him after the meeting was done, like Tigger, and said, here's my number, here's my address. I'd love to help, and didn't hear a damn thing, and never got a call back. But I ran into Chris a year later when I was getting my journalism degree, and we actually ran into each other in the hallway outside KCMU, and he invited me to get involved. That's what I actually did. So in '87, a year later, I started getting involved in the station. Things were much different back then.
Story of perseverance.
Well,
stick with it.
Stick with it. You bet.
And then how'd the volunteer gig turn into full-time gig?
So I worked on a couple of different areas. One was we had a regular news program. I worked on that, and then also started getting involved in the fundraising part of the station. I was moving furniture on the side to afford my KCMU volunteer habit, but nailed a half-time position in the fundraising side. And then a year later or so, I became KCMU's full-time employee number 2. And full-time employee number 1 was Chris Knob, who came up from 415 Records to start developing KCMU. I feel old.
What was your relationship to music growing up?
It was a pretty tremendous one, actually, because I mentioned growing up in Germany, we didn't have all that many channels, access to the emerging music at the time. But as I've told people, I had a KEXP growing up in Germany as an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, and his name is Mike, who's my older brother. And he was the fellow who scoured the earth for music that should be heard and brought it to me. So that's how I learned about, artists we know well today, like Bob Marley and The Clash and Ian Dury and Kraftwerk and whatnot. So he and I were both sort of stereo nerds as well as record nerds. And then when I went to college in Munich, I was also a club DJ in Munich for a couple of years. And that's where I could observe the relationship between a song being played and then what happens. And most of the time, people would respond favorably, but not every time. And I would have a couple of aces up my sleeve in order to get people on the dance floor. I remember that was Prince's Controversy and Kraftwerk's Numbers. Those were the two.
You had some go-tos?
Those are my two
The energy
go-tos.
wasn't where you needed it? Yeah.
Yes, when I had to dig myself out of a hole.
Recovery tracks.
Yeah. So when I came to Seattle to finish my degree at the UW, it really came with a kind of a love affair of music, a little bit of understanding between how music can enrich somebody's life. Yeah, that was the beginning of it all.
Mm-hmm. And when you look back on 3 decades of building this place, what are the key ingredients that you think have been so successful in taking this from really what people thought of as a traditional radio station at UW to a content platform that reaches millions of people a week?
Gee, put it that way. I think there's actually different answers to that question. And the reason why is, as I've told folks, there's a reason why KEXP is in Seattle, because it's a music town, it's a film town, it's a book town, it's a coffee town, it's a technology town, and the foundation for KEXP is the currency of music creativity that swirls around, and we've never had more artists publish music than now in our area. And that greater volume of music has never been more diverse. So we've had our eras. We had our jazz era then in the 50s and prior. And then in the 60s, we had our garage rock, with the Sonics. And then, into the 80s, we had our grunge era. And then as you get into a little bit into the early parts of the 90s and on, that there was this renaissance of music. All kinds of scenes emerged, whether it was, the existing, the grunge, the indie rock, but also a real terrific electronic scene, reggae scene, hip hop scene, just fill in the blank. So Seattle's music currency right now is multi-genre. And it's a great time to be a music fan if you live in Seattle. And I'm glad to see that venues are opening back up again, so these artists can get in front of people again.
Indeed.
Yeah.
As am I. Did you feel the pressure at certain points to sort of pick and choose genres and pick a lane or two as a station? I mean, you all have been so incredible about offering so much variety, but as the station evolved, did you go through those moments of like, hey, we need to be thought of as X?
It's a great question, and the answer is no. And the reason why is, the values you see reflected today, the music curatorial philosophy, that was really anchored in the early to mid 80s, during the time when Dow Constantine was a DJ on our station.
KCMU, right?
And a few years before I came on the scene. And that's when the station started getting more serious about music discovery. And so, the values that we articulate today were there back then. The values we articulate today are all good music deserves to be heard. And what we try to do with our mission is built on the premise that music makes lives better. What we're trying to do is to get music to play a larger role in your life, because music makes lives better. Larger role in your life is better. So our mission statement is to enrich your life by championing music and discovery. And the reason why we use the word championing is to remind ourselves, but remind the world that we're here not just to play music, but we're here to be an advocate for the role of music in your life and uphold the music lives, music fans, but also of artists. Mm-hmm. And the reason why we say by championing music and discovery is there to remind us we really got to fight the economic convenience of just playing the hits. So our mission statement directs us to champion discovery, which means our job every day is to do something that's really difficult, and that is to bring the unfamiliar to people. It's not the way to go if you want to start up a whole new radio station. That's not the tried and true model, but it works here in Seattle, and folks around the world really, really respond to it.
Yeah, I know it's why I turn to the station and my favorite shows like The Roadhouse with Greg Vandy and others. I've found more music through Greg Vandy than just about any other source, and it's that sort of unknown of what he'll play that night that you catches your ear, and then you go look it up or you're listening to him talk about the artist. And
we love hearing that. And Greg is an amazing person. Amazing. He's got a heart of gold, and he really reflects an important attribute our DJs have. I remember John Richards, who oversees our DJs, he's also our morning host, told me many years ago, there's really 3 attributes we look for in a DJ. We actually tend not to hire DJs that come from commercial stations. Mm-hmm. What we do look for is somebody who has these 3 things. Number 1, loves music. Number 2, knows it, just has a body of knowledge. Mm-hmm. But number 3 that you also have to have is that person that they have to share it. That's part of what they're intrinsically motivated to do, is get this music into other people's lives, which was a role that my brother played. He was the one that had to share that music with me. So you get somebody like Greg, who is an amazing host, amazing brain, chock full of so much information, but he's got to share it. And that's what KEXP is there for.
Yeah, there's at least 3 or 4 records a year on my top 10 list that I can trace right back
that's
to
awesome.
Greg. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear.
You mentioned earlier that you are really trying to diversify and have diversified the artists, the DJs, what you're featuring, what you're playing. You made some big moves in 2020 to sort of shake up the programming. How'd you approach that, the decisions around that as a station, with your leadership, with the DJs?
Yeah. It was an important time. And if we go back to 2015 is when Too Little Too Late is when we started getting more serious about the pursuit of racial equity, becoming an anti-racist organization. And this is an area where we struggle and should struggle, because it's important work, it's difficult work, it's uncomfortable work. But back then we started coming together as an organization, started training, and started developing a philosophy and awareness, sort of raising of a consciousness, starting that. And one of the questions that we've had, if you're going to pursue curatorial excellence, if you're going to enrich people's lives by championing music and discovery, if you aren't able to do that through a racial equity lens, you ain't doing your full job. Mm-hmm. And that really brought these tensions, these questions. What do we do? And our programming team had started working on plans to diversify the voices on our air. And in the wake of George's murder, like a lot of organizations, it was a moment we felt compelled to pull the trigger on these. So we reduced the number of hours of persons who are white on the air and introduced many more hours of persons of color. And you know what? Our audience has grown significantly during this time. Out of the 50 plus stations in the Seattle area, we traditionally have been like the mid 20s, and now we're in the top 10, and sometimes we're in the top 5, and one time we were the top 3. So there's a response our city is making to having different voices, more voices of color on our air. But it is important work fundamentally, and you've got to be willing as an organization, also as leadership, to fail, as we say, to step in it. And we do that. But thankfully, we've been able to engender trust inside the organization to work on this together. For the white people in the organization to come together on their own to figure out how to make decisions about what's next, whether it's programming, policies, procedures, et cetera, compensation, but also coming together, white folks with persons of color at the same time. The last thing you want to do is really ask the BIPOC folks on your staff to provide a service to you to help you become anti-racist. And we're cognizant of that as we, like a lot of organizations did, published a statement of solidarity in 2020 that summer. But the way that we look at that statement is we put ourselves on the hook to actually flip around our talk and walk ratio, which have been a lot of talk or not knowing what to talk about, and certainly not doing much walking. And about 18 months later, we published another statement giving folks an update on where we've been successful in this pursuit, where we haven't been successful, and really making sure we're transparent. And this is not a 6-month project. It's not a 6-year project. It's a 6-generation project. And I think KEXP has so much more work to do here, so much more to achieve in that pursuit of becoming an anti-racist organization. But I think we're pointing in a good direction. As I said before, too little, too late. But I think we're pointed in a good direction.
Well, I think the way you all have led and communicated what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it has been really beneficial to lots of other organizations that are trying to find their own way here too. And I mean, a lot of other organizations, they're trying to add diversity, increase equity, increase inclusion, but you also had to address this by subtracting things, right? Because you only have so much airtime.
That's right.
And so much you can play. So you had to tell, white artists and white DJs less time for you. Those are, I imagine, were difficult conversations and decisions you all had to go through.
Well, I think they were important conversations to get to alignment, would be able to make these changes, and they're inherently difficult. So the question is, are you able to come together with a healthy enough organizational culture to support making difficult decisions, at the same time being just, simply clear about what we're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
But I was really impressed and really inspired by how all of our staff, BIPOC staff, white staff, came around to really support this. But there is a fear. There's a courage that requires you to sort of confront that fear. Because speaking for myself, leading in arts organizations, whatever we did, we didn't want to fail. And that's really something I had to reflect upon. Well, Tom, if all you're doing is worrying about whether or not you're going to fail or not, what about the larger picture?
Fail in what way?
Failing in making the wrong decisions, whether it's to policy or programming, or as a white man, it can be daunting. I don't want to screw up. But that's my problem. What remains is the larger compelling need for us to bring equity into our organizations and fight racism. Like I said before, I don't think you can look people in the eye and say, yes, we're firing on all 8 cylinders and pursuing our mission without doing that work. I don't think you can look somebody in the eye and say you're doing that without doing that work.
Yeah, absolutely. So the pandemic has disrupted a lot of people's business models and operations. What's it meant for KEXP as we kind of come out the other side of this versus what you looked like going into it as far as your revenue model and the nuts and bolts of your finances?
Yeah, I think there's enough for a made-for-TV movie in there somewhere. It was really a topsy-turvy time, like a lot of organizations. For us, I remember I was in our live room, our large session room, with a number of colleagues. There's like 12 of us, and I don't know what the date was, but I had looked down on my phone, and the King County number of deaths went from 9 to 10. It went to 2 digits. And I remember thinking, all right, this is going to be tough. This is going to require all of us to come together and squeeze out all the wisdom we can, do the right things amidst an environment where there is fear. It is scary. There is sadness. There's anger as well. And what I witnessed was our team really responding well. That job one is our staff's health, our volunteers' health. And if that meant having to make changes to programming or reduce, the rate of production and whatnot, then so be it. And then, second to that was ensuring we could continue doing our work. But job one, let's not lose lives, but also play a role in the community to help get the word out, whether it was referring folks to King County, health department, also getting the word out where you can get tested, et cetera. But behind the scenes, our rate of production, we went from, 350 sessions down to 0 because we didn't want to bring artists into our studio. We didn't want our staff to get in contact with artists because they're flying in from around the world to do these sessions.
Yep.
And but the team, with their creativity, John Richards came up with Lawn in the Morning, kind of a play on word on John in the Morning, where we figured out a way to have artists, deep sea diver, remember this, playing live on his lawn as he's watching through the front window of his house. So there's that separation, yet at the same time able still to get this live music that should be heard, needs to be heard to people.
So very Seattle that was. What
It
John
really,
was doing,
I think it
right?
really was.
Yeah.
And our engineering team, God bless them, they had to figure out how to build these studios because our DJs weren't able to come in here.
Yeah. And God bless John's neighbors too, right?
Yes. And so we built studios in people's basements and attics, and had in setting up the channels for them to, do their work from their bedroom if needed. And then the team also came together in a thoughtful way, members of all the different teams we have, and processing on a monthly basis, what's next. And they did a very thoughtful job. People rose to the occasion. They support each other. That sort of attitude, this too shall pass kind of, attitude, I think served folks well.
Well, it's great to see
It's taking a while for it to pass, though, let me tell you.
Yeah. And it's great to see you back in the studio. It's great to see the gathering space filled. It's interesting to think of spaces like that. We're looking for those places to kind of reconnect, and you go out there and there's people with their dogs or somebody doing a Zoom call, the coffee shop's open, people hanging out in the space that serves lots of different functions. Yeah. And it was cool before all of this. And I think maybe even cooler and more desired on the other side as we're kind of looking to get back together and work in different places and hang out and socialize and reconnect.
I think as I walk through the gathering space, which has this cafe, which has this record store, as you mentioned, a place for people to come together, just simply walking across the gathering space is so much more meaningful now than it was even 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, it was pretty darn special. So to see the folks we serve being together, you can't buy that in a store.
Yeah, I was sort of like behaving like a sociologist or anthropologist out there, just kind of hovering over people, looking at what they were doing, and just because interesting to sort of, okay, why'd you come here, right? Why'd you?
Of all the things you could have done.
Yeah, why'd you? But it's great to see it. It's great to see it full, and
I like to witness all the job interviews that are taking place out there.
Yeah, what's it meant to? You all moved here 4 or 5 years ago to Seattle, to this location, Seattle Center campus, and before kind of in a nondescript building off of Dexter, and not a lot around you, and now you're in Seattle's living room, part of Seattle's living room. Yeah. What's it meant for you and KEXP to be here?
It really kind of flipped us around, as one of our board members said. KEXP turned itself inside out and the public outside in. And you're right. And the building that we moved into when we left the University of Washington. 6,000 square foot block, cinder block building. You could have been listening to us for 30 years, probably never knew where we were, but there we were at Dexter and Denny in South Lake Union. And thanks to Paul Allen for really stepping forward to support the station's mission.
You had a pretty good rent deal there, right?
We did, but he and his team, ended up supporting the station in some really meaningful ways. One is the $1 a year lease for 10 years. That always helps. But his folks actually went out and purchased all the equipment, working with our engineer to design it. And so when we made the move, we packed up. We started packing on a Saturday. We arrived here on a Sunday, and then Monday morning, this facility at Dexter and Denny, it just worked without a hitch. Although there was one issue. A few months later, we had an on-air campaign, pledge drive. And there was a power outage in the neighborhood, and of course we've got UPS, we got battery backups and whatnot. But somehow we didn't figure out how to put the lighting, the light fixtures into the protected circuit. So we were pitch black at 7:00 at night. Of course, we're saying that on the air, and of course all the phones start ringing because people want to support a radio station that's trying to struggle getting its power back.
Turn the lights back on, literally.
But Paul also supported the station. He had made a commitment to actually match our operating budget back then. Back then, we were a tiny operation. We're about $250,000 organization, 3 or 4 full-time staff. And I'd made the suggestion to his chief of staff. He said, this is awesome. This is like catching lightning in a jar. If there is a possibility of front-loading those dollars, I'd put myself on the hook, ourselves on the hook, to become financially self-reliant at the $2 million level after 3 years. And the business plan was pretty simple. It was to really hire amazing folks in terms of programming and production, but also in fundraising. In that first year, we raised $1 million on our own, so to speak. And Paul supplied the other $1 million for that deficit, operating deficit. In the second year, it was about $500,000 deficit that he covered. In the third year is about $100,000. And so it's a cool story about KEXP kind of coming in this much higher level of operating, but it's a much more important story in terms of venture philanthropy.
And for many executive directors of small nonprofits, it's just sort of tempting to take the annual operating commitment, right, from Paul or whoever. It'd be sure thing. $250 a year sounds great, but you had some foresight to say, let me structure it differently.
Well, I had some conversation with myself and conferred with some colleagues, like, this is what I'm thinking. I think we'd end up becoming a more vibrant organization if we could invest the capital.
Yeah.
And to his credit, this is a great case study for venture philanthropy. He came to the station here at Seattle Center and was able to show him what he helped build, because he also came forth during the capital campaign for this new facility, and was able to show him the studios. And I also thanked him for his leadership and investment in Upstream, that music festival. And I remember walking down that hallway right over there and saying, please know how much I appreciate what you've done with Upstream to support emerging artists. And he stopped me and he looked at me and he said, emerging Northwest artists. So he had a deep, caring, relationship with the Northwest in general, and Northwest music. I don't think any of us will know exactly all the things that he did.
No doubt. An enduring legacy that many of us are still discovering.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. So we close out, Tom, on our podcast here with the regular segment, which is, what's your perfect Saturday in Seattle? Take us through that day.
Well, my wife and I, we love staring at a fire. We have a place at this nonprofit that has an arrangement with the Tulalip tribe where we have these lots in a forest. And Mary and I go up there by default every Friday night. And you're out in the woods, you're out in the forest, and you light a fire. And it's one of the most effective ways of reducing your blood pressure. So that's the way we restore ourselves. And Mary as well. She's the Dean of Academic Affairs at City University. My job is pretty interesting, and there's a lot in it, but she works twice as hard as I do. So we hold hands, go up to the place, and stare into a fire. Does that answer your question? Is that what you're getting at?
No, that's great. Yeah, it's your perfect Saturday, and it's one of the reasons I think we all love living where we do, because we can access places like that, and we've got the best of both worlds of a great urban environment of arts and culture and food, music, and we can escape too to nature and recharge. I know that drill and routine well, and subscribe myself.
Would you mind if I added one more comment on something else? Is that all right?
No.
Is that all right?
Please.
All right. You and I were just chatting too about sound transit.
Yeah.
And the current plans, the preferred alternative is to go down about 100 feet just on the other side of this studio wall and then kind of carve underneath us. And it's really an untenable plan. When I say we, it's not just KEXP, but it's also the station shoehorned up against Vera Project and SIF, Seattle International Film Festival, and Seattle Rep, Cornish. And so we've been getting the word out. We love light rail. We needed to come to Seattle Center, but this particular location, this particular configuration of the plan, on one hand, we love the idea of bringing folks to Seattle Center. On the other hand, we don't want to lose 5 organizations that people are wanting to come to begin with.
Right, the whole reason we get on the train.
So that's what we're focusing on right now, and reaching out to Sound Transit Board members and community leaders. Let's get light rail to Seattle Center, and let's get it in a way that doesn't topple over organizations. Yeah,
I appreciate your voice and leadership on that issue. It's an important one, and similar challenges really along the whole corridor through downtown.
Absolutely.
We all agree we should have done this 40, 50 years ago, but here we are, and let's do it. We'll get it right.
Yeah,
so
you bet.
Thanks for mentioning that. And thanks for your leadership of this incredible Seattle institution.
You're more than welcome.
What you've built for our community here, but not just us, as we, worldwide, that enjoy what comes out of this place each and every day and the artists you feature.
Yeah.
The job's open, right? And you're part of the committee that's providing some input on
that's right.
the next person. So if people want to apply, they can go to the website, I assume, right?
You can. You can go to the website, and on one hand, it's really interesting working on, because I've been here more than 30 years, working on a recruitment for your replacement. I've never done that before.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, what comes to my mind is whoever comes in is going to have a team that's going to make KEXP even more impactful, even better. And it'll be fun, going up to the forest, those Friday nights and tuning in and just watching that continue to grow, listening to it grow, so to speak. It's a great gig.
Indeed. Well, we'll keep our eyes open for that announcement of that next leader, but congrats on all your success here and what you've been able to accomplish. And thanks for spending time with us on our podcast today.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tom. Just somebody I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and anybody who loves music in the city of Seattle or beyond, I think owes a debt of gratitude for what Tom has built over there over his 3 decades with the station, and leaves KEXP in its strongest position that it's ever been in financially and otherwise. And what a great institution here within the city of Seattle. It was a lot of fun getting over to the station and wandering the halls and being in the gathering space, as I noted. And if you're looking for a place just to go work for a few hours in the afternoon, don't forget about the gathering space. It's almost, they don't bill it this way, but it's kind of a little co-working space. So drop your laptop and get a cup of coffee and hang out and listen to music. It looks like it's dog friendly. There was a dog in there when I was in there. I think I'll bring my doodle Zoe by someday and maybe work from there myself. So don't forget about the gathering space over there on the Seattle Center campus. I want to close out our podcast with our regular segment of what you just can't miss in downtown. I've got two things for you in this episode. One, Artley Coffee, a new coffee shop that hasn't opened yet, but soon will open on the corner of First and Stewart in downtown Seattle. And this is specialty coffee made by robots. They've got a couple of shops in California. I think they're in Portland now, and soon will open up in Seattle. And the robots make the coffee. They've got robot baristas, and you order via an app, of course, and you can get as complicated as you want with your drink because those robots can't judge you and they don't have eyes to roll at you. So load it up on complication if that's your thing. If you got a complicated drink, test out the robot with all of your requests. So Artley Coffee on the corner of First and Stewart. Keep your eyes on it. They make coffee with robots and artificial intelligence, and it's real. It's real, and I think it's coming. And the other one is, I think we've talked about the Crocodile before and how they moved from their location over there on 2nd Avenue in Belltown, moved in during the pandemic to the old El Gaucho space in Belltown on 1st Avenue. And of course, there's the music venue. They've built a hotel in there too. And what I wanted to highlight, which isn't talked about as much, is the 100-person seat theater they have in there called Hereafter, which is featuring comedy and live podcast recordings and films and all kinds of different things. And you can get food and drink in there. Nice intimate space, just 100 seats Hereafter at the Crocodile. So check that out as well. And as we move into May here, the Downtown Seattle Association and a number of partners will be putting on events and block parties and concerts and music and all sorts of things throughout downtown in the month of May and into the summer, including our Downtown Summer Sounds concert series. And you can keep an eye on all the things happening downtown at loveseatown.com. It's a microsite featuring all the different events that we are putting on as an organization, but lots of other things that are happening as well that others are putting on. So I invite you to check out loveseatown.com as your go-to source for all the things that you must see and do in downtown Seattle. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Seattle City Makers, presented by the Downtown Seattle Association with support from James Cito and production by Spark Creative.